Hello and welcome to a special edition of the show coming to you from New York. The UN's largest agency in charge of Palestinian refugees was meant to be a temporary fix. This week it turns 60. Well, now that the US President Barack Obama has brought together the Palestinian and Israeli leadership to try to jumpstart the Middle East peace process, one major question stands out: what to do with the millions of Palestinian refugees? It's the largest and one of the longest-standing refugee cases in the world today. Almost 5 million people, or roughly half of the Palestinian population, remain stateless, and there's no end in sight. In 1948, during the fighting that led to the creation of the State of Israel, about 60% of the Palestinian people became displaced. They fled or were expelled from their towns in historic Palestine to what would become the Gaza Strip and West Bank, and to neighboring Arab countries, namely Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. When the United Nations set up an agency in 1949 to deal with their needs, there were about 700,000 Palestinian refugees, most of whom believed they would be going back home once things stabilized. But now, as UNRWA marks its 60-year anniversary this week, there is no visible end to their plight. Today, the number of refugees registered with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency is 4.6 million. So today we ask, what solution is there for the Palestinian refugees and what shape would it take? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE and enter the chat room and then take part. And of course, we welcome your phone calls into the show as well. Well, I'm joined now by Karen AbuZayd, the Commissioner-General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, which maintains 58 camps in the Middle East, providing food, shelter, healthcare and education in those camps, making it one of the biggest employers in the region as well. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
It's been a couple of years now.
Yes.
Now, here on the sidelines of the US, or part of the whole UN General Assembly, I should say, in the US, President Obama has managed to get together the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Abu Mazen, the Palestinian president, to try to kickstart these stalled peace talks. But the issue of the Palestinian refugees is still off the table. So what good does it do you?
Well, it's off the table. It's not off the table. It's on the table, but way at the bottom of the table, let's say. One of those final status issues that sits there along with Jerusalem and the borders and water and so on. And it's just one of the campaigns we've had for years now, is to try to get it further up on the agenda and to make sure people remember that they're not going to get a final settlement until they solve this problem, until they at least treat this problem and begin to talk to refugees about what their ideas are.
Considering the time you spent 9 years living in Gaza, 9 years heading up the agency, how have you remained optimistic there could be a solution that will actually affect and change the lives of these people that you have to take care of?
Well, I think we take some of our hopefulness from the people themselves. It's difficult sometimes because it's difficult for them. They become, frustrated and angry and full of despair, but then they bounce back, as Palestinians do, and they have to look forward for their future, for their children. They think always about, let's hope that my child's future is better than my life today.
It just doesn't seem to get any better, though. If you look at the situation when Benjamin Netanyahu talks about an economic peace primarily, it's still in a climate where there are increasing settlements, where the West Bank is basically little pockets of Palestinian population. They're not contiguous. You've got Gaza, which has been pretty much wrecked. What chance is there of a proper Palestinian homeland?
Well, sometimes it's hard to think how there could be a viable Palestinian state. The way things are, as you said, all fragmented on the West Bank, completely closed off from Gaza, the differences between the Palestinians, West Bank, Gaza. But at the same time, there are some bright spots around the West Bank in terms of security improving in certain places, the economy improving, and you have, of course, Prime Minister Fayyad's plan to build the institutions and increase the capacity of the people in the institutions so that they will be ready for a state when it can be declared one day.
Let me get to a question that came in from a viewer in Michigan here in the US. Linda Taylor from a place called Escanaba in Michigan wrote in saying, "I not only believe the Palestinians deserve statehood, I think Israel should go back to the 1967 borders." Considering the situation, is it even worth talking about that nowadays?
Well, I think you have to talk about that. And I think this morning we had our ad hoc liaison committee on these issues between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the World Bank and donors. And this was mentioned by several, that we have to go back to the 1967 borders. Now, that probably means some land swaps from some of the settlements that are there. But otherwise, the Palestinians right now only have about 20% of the original West Bank that they're actually controlling.
Let me get another question to you. This one from Knoxville in Tennessee here in the US. And MT Graham wrote in saying, there is no end in sight to the refugee issue, and even an open and reasonable discussion of the problem's origins is apparently still too controversial for some. When you look at that, how that discussion is a little, as you say, at the bottom of the agenda, how again, does it give you much hope, or how do you approach the job? Does it give you much hope that you can actually push it up?
Well, we haven't managed to push it up, but that's because there have been so many conflicts, recurring conflicts since I've been in Gaza, the long intifada, and then one by one, either something happening in Lebanon or something happening again in Gaza. So yes, there's that difficulty, but we'll just keep mentioning it. And I think people are beginning to realize that they do have to solve this problem, that they can't talk about a peace settlement unless they include the refugees and the refugees' interests and opinions.
In the meantime, your agency, UNRWA, remains one of the biggest employers in the region. You actually function like a small country, providing healthcare, education, and so on and so forth. How do you cope financially, considering the burden, the stress on you? Well,
that's a big problem for us now. I think the donors have been very good over the years, 60 years. Every year our budget is bigger. We have more refugees. We need more teachers, this sort of thing. We can't tax anyone the way governments can do, so the donors have to bring the money for it. And they've been very good about making sure we could have our primary health care and our primary education. But it's become a problem. And this year we have a difficulty of maybe even meeting our payroll in December, because that has been affected, not just the emergency programs or the projects we want to do to improve living conditions and infrastructure projects, but our basic services of education and health are under threat now, and it's something we have to deal with.
And of course, you've got your high-level gathering, a high-level meeting, and sort of celebration of the 60th anniversary of UNRWA. Commemoration, I should say. Yes. On Thursday at the United Nations, a lot of top people coming there to provide support and pledge. Can you actually turn that into real results? Can you actually get some real commitments from that kind of gathering?
I think so. It's the point of taking it out to everybody, everyone who's ever acknowledged UNRWA, who's ever contributed to UNRWA, having a lot of bilateral meetings, and to have people see not just what UNRWA has been able to do over the years, but what the refugees have accomplished. Being refugees for 60 years, being under occupation for 40 years, but look at them, look how many of them. Only a third of the refugees live in camps. And there are as many refugees in the diaspora as there are in the region with us. So the Palestinians are very well educated, they're very enterprising, and they'll take care of themselves if you allow them the freedom to be so.
And of course, to many, the financial support for UNRWA comes largely from the West, and there seems to be so little from the Arab world. You sit in one of the wealthiest regions in the world, you're functioning in one of the wealthiest regions. I know it's a sensitive question, but why is it that the Arab states haven't really put up what they should for what's going on there?
It's not so sensitive. We talk to them all about it all the time now, and I think they're understanding more and they're trying to help more. But I think also, if you understand the concept of charity in Islam, that you know that the zakat goes directly to a neighbor or to someone you know, and this is something that they like to do. They'll give a lot in the emergencies. So we have, the Kuwaitis this year gave us the whole amount of money we asked for at the beginning of the end of the Gaza conflict earlier in the year, $34 million. So we are trying to show them how they can contribute to the general fund too. Adopt a school, for example, have the school be their school, and they then pay the running costs as well as the classroom building and so on. So it's also our approach to them that's important.
So to create an attachment, in effect,
yes.
So it's ongoing as opposed to just paying money.
Yeah.
We've got a call from Italy, Commissioner General here. We've got Franklin on the line. Go ahead, Franklin. What would you like to ask?
Yeah, I just want to ask, forever since up to today, for Palestinians and the Israelis, all the international communities ask them for peace agreement, and they go to table, sign the peace agreement up to today. Why, ever since, this peace agreement doesn't work?
Well, I guess it's your perspective on why the peace agreements, there's the shuffling from table to table, as Franklin says, and nothing comes of it.
Yes. Well, that's what we want to, and to get them all to the same table again and at the same place in the table. The latest one, the roadmap, of course, was sequential. And when you do that, of course, you're allowing things to be held up by either one side or the other, saying the other side hasn't done what they have to do before the next step goes forward. So we're hoping now, with the new American administration's intensive engagement in this, that things will change and we'll move forward. We also think it takes a balanced broker, and that's what maybe we haven't always had in the past.
I was talking about the financial situation. You and I last spoke face-to-face in Amman, if I recall correctly, in May 2007. the world has changed a lot since then. We've got a pretty severe global economic crisis. How has that affected you? Have you felt the pinch from that?
Certainly, I think we're feeling it now, because of course most governments have a budget for a couple of years, so they had already pledged to us, and when they're very faithful in keeping their pledges. But now they're beginning to tell us they can't give us more next year when we always need more every year, and so that's why we're partly up against this difficulty now, and are very, very frightened about next year. Actually, our finances.
Well, let's see if we can squeeze in a call before the break. Ellie in the US here. Ellie, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask about the Jewish Arab refugee that have never been mentioned. Say about 800,000 have left the Arab countries, and they never took a penny from UNRWA or anything.
Okay. So, all right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break and we'll get to that question in just a moment. We're going to pause here. As we do, let me remind you to take, to look in the chat room. Also, we're taking an instant poll in that chat room where today we ask, how do you think the Palestinian refugee problem should be resolved? You can vote and join in the conversation with your questions and comments by logging onto livestation.com, entering the chat room. You'll see the debates taking place in there right now. We'll be right back.